Hey guys, welcome to another episode of VTEC Academy. You're about to get schooled. Well, this particular video has been a long time coming. What I have here in front of me is an automatic harness from a Honda CR-V, and I'm going to show you how to modify it so it can be used with an RSX engine swap and a manual transmission. Now, these harnesses are a lot less expensive than the RSX ones. I see the RSX harnesses going for $200. This particular harness here, I bought, I believe, for about $29 without warranty, usually about, I don't know, 35, 40 bucks with warranty, but that's a heck of a lot cheaper. And it's actually not that hard to convert, so I'm going to show you how to do it. Now, I happen to have a manual harness here also for comparison. So let's take a look at it as well. The harnesses are very similar. They have the same shielding on both sides. The lengths are the same lengths. The difference is the plugs that are on here. There are a lot more plugs on the automatic harness. Let me show you what I mean. If we look at this harness, it has everything the other harness does with the exception of the reverse lockout and the reverse light switch. It has, instead of a countershaft speed sensor though, it has a vehicle speed sensor. Let's take a look at that. Out the bottom here of this part of the harness, we have the temperature water sensor. We should also have the reverse lights come out here, and we should also have the vehicle speed sensor. What we have instead is this monstrosity right here. So we have a couple of solenoids and the transmission range switch, and both the main shaft and counter shaft speed sensors on this particular part of the harness. All of this stuff is going to come out. If we wanted to keep a counter shaft speed sensor, we would actually repurpose two of the wires, the power on the ground, from this counter shaft speed sensor, but we'd still have to run a new signal wire because the signal doesn't go in the same place. So if we move forward a little bit more on the harness, we get to this portion right here. All this stuff right here is normal. This is for our sub harness that includes the alternator and the knock sensor, and actually some more stuff for this particular car. I think it's the sensor telling where the intake manifolds are, but we're not going to need that. Also the idler control valve. But this group of wires right here, again, for automatic transmission, all of this is going to come out. So far, this section and this section are going to come out. If we move down the harness a little bit further, we get to the injector section. On the injector section, you have your 4 injector connectors, and then you have this extra connector here, right here. This is for the intake manifold runner solenoid. There's a power wire and a signal wire basically that comes from the ECU. What we're going to do is not remove this, but we're going to repurpose this. This is going to become our reverse lockout. So what happens is if you have a Honda ECU made from, say, a base model RSX, you can actually take the intake manifold solenoid and repurpose it as your reverse lockout. So you would just basically shorten this, have it come out here where it could get to the reverse lockout, and you'd be done. If you're using a Type S ECU though, it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to have to repin down at the other end at the ECU plugs to get that to work properly. Speaking of ECU plugs, these are the ECU plugs. So you've got the A plug, the B plug, and this is the C plug. The C plug is all automatic stuff. This thing's going to come out. This, of course, is our C101 plug. It's the one that interfaces between the engine harness and the car's body harness. For the most part, we're just going to do some modifications to it. There's a lot of automatic stuff that has to come out that has to do with communication with the automatic transmission, power, stuff like that. That's going to come out. But what we are going to add is our 2 backup light wires to this. So anyway, now we're down to the nitty-gritty. The first half of this is pretty boring. It's basically stripping down the wiring harness, preparing it for working on it. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking off the gaffer's tape, all the electrical tape, the loom, these plastic shields. I am going to go ahead and mark right here once I get down to the bare wires with a yellow marker wire so that I can use measurements to make sure I get everything to the right length. So when I put it all back together, things come out at the right spot and everything. But for the most part, this is just going to be taking it all apart. I did wash this harness ahead of time, and I pressure washed it and used some degreaser on it and that helped a little bit. Sometimes these things are horrible though, particularly if they leak power steering fluid. Sometimes you find this end over here and the part that is down where the crank angle sensor gets really, really dirty from the power steering fluid. Anyway, I'm going to strip it down. So you could actually go and strip it further and then put all fresh tape on it. I'm not really interested in dressing this harness up. Another thing you might think about doing is maybe after you get done stripping out all the automatic stuff and adding your manual stuff is then going back and doing kind of a budget wire tuck. But that's not what we're here to do today. What we're going to do is we're now going to strip out the wires that we don't need and get rid of them. And once we do that, we're going to come back and we're going to add in the wires that we do need. So to begin with, there was this one branch that came out the front of the plastic piece that had a bunch of solenoid wires on it for the automatic transmission. You'll notice right here, these pair of green-yellow wires go into the other branch. You want to be careful when you see stuff like that. You don't want to just cut them not knowing where they go. What happens is the green-yellow wires are ganged together back over here, and you want to make sure that you're not just kind of cutting things and pulling it out. But we can actually come up here to the end and cut it. If we were to unwrap this part right here, we would see that they were ganged together, and that's how they would get back to multiple devices. One of them is probably going back to the gang plug, and the other one came up and went off to one of the solenoids, and it also came, or probably one of the sensors, and also comes back to another sensor. So we want to make sure that those two sensors stay intact so we don't lose one of the other sensors that it connects to. We're just going to tape it back up here. We could, if you wanted to, shorten it and resolder it down here, or even make it go directly to the sensor that it does go to, which it looks like it goes to the, let's see here. Yeah, it goes to this temperature air sensor. We could have just basically crimped a new pin on and got rid of half of the wire, but I'm just gonna leave it alone for right now. No sense in making a bunch more work for us. Okay, so now we have this group of wires that needs to come out. Again, we have another green yellow wire that goes to the water temp sensor. We don't want to cut it out of the group. Let's see where it connects to. It goes forward and then back again towards the ECU. So we're gonna just make sure we cut it again right here. Where's my cutter? There they are. All right, now this mess we can start to remove. So start working it down. When I get to this point, what I can actually do is just cut it right here and then just start peeling it all backwards. So I am going to cut everything off. Get it down near this yellow bunch of wires, and I'll just kind of push it past. I think when they make them, they tend to gang certain wires together. So you kind of figure out which ones get ganged together. It makes it a little bit easier to pull them all out again. Okay, we're down here to the firewall plug with this group. Now let's go to the next batch of wires that was going to be removed. That's this batch right here. Now, again, if I was going to do a countershaft speed sensor, I would save the 2 wires out of here, which power and ground the countershaft speed sensor. I'm not going to do that though. We're going to add a VSS sensor. So we're going to go ahead and actually take all of these wires out. So first I want to unwrap it, make sure, again, I have 2 brown yellow wires, so that means they gang in here somewhere. I want to make sure that I don't cut them off and break a connection to something that's needed. So I'm going to unwrap this, find out where that is, and cut it. Another thing is I'm going to use a black yellow wire and a black wire for my VSS. So I'm going to take a quick look and see if there is a black wire. And there is one. So when I peel back all the other wires, I am going to leave that black wire for use with my vehicle speed sensor. So there is no black yellow wire though, so I'm not going to use that. By the way, if this was in a cord harness, there would be a black yellow wire in there too. I could snag that for use with my vehicle speed sensor. Huh, funny. Okay, it turns out these 2 wires I thought were brown yellow. One of them is green yellow and one of them is brown yellow. So they do not gang together. So they are though going to the gang plug in here. So basically I'm going to just cut them. I'm going to cut the green one here and let's see where the brown yellow one goes. It goes to our countershaft speed sensor, so it's just a signal ground. So we can go ahead and cut that. My black wire is right here. I'm going to go ahead and cut that and leave it nice and long because we can use it for our countershaft speed sensor. I'll pull it out of the way. Now the rest of these wires, they can all be stripped out just like the other ones were. So start off by cutting them. And we'll start the process of pushing them all out. Okay, we've got them past the yellow mark. I'm actually going to retape the yellow, and the reason being is it's really loose now and it may slide, and I don't want to lose my positioning with that, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it off. Add a new piece. That again is, I'm using this for dimensions, so I want to make sure it stays in the same place. Okay, I now have a large group of wires. I need to go ahead and pull out the rest of the way. I think this is why a lot of people don't do this.
I was going to say, this is the picture of what people think of when they think about
Wiring
and why they don't want to do it.
Yeah. We call this the witch wire wear scare. There's probably a quicker way to do this, but I do this so seldom. It's like I find that one wire at a time tends to have less mistakes. Okay, as you're peeling these back, you may wind up find that some of them are ganged in with other ones. You can just clip those off. This seems to be ganged with oh, how funny. You notice here my D plug is coming loose now. And now some of these wires are going back towards other points in the harness. So what I'm going to do right now is just if it went to my D plug and now goes back in, I'm just going to cut them off from the D plug real quick. That plug is gone. And now I'm left with the automatic wires that went basically to either the C101 or the A or the B plug. So I'll just figure out where they go and pluck them out as well. Okay, so on our C101 plug, we wound up with these, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 5 wires, and we're going to have to depin those. So a pick tool to release the lock. Sometimes these things can get pretty crispy, particularly on Arizona cars. You can buy new plugs if you so desire. Even with the lock is broken, they still work pretty well. Okay, got the right tool. Let's try this again. There is a video that we have that shows how to depin these things and what tools you need. We'll put a link down in the notes below, but it basically talks about what tools you need to easily depin both the C101 plug and also the ECU plug. Why are you giving me a hard time?
It's all at O'Doul's.
Oh, no, it's not. So, funny, I unlocked the top lock, but I didn't unlock the bottom lock. So, this particular wire is on the bottom. Well, I suppose it could be the O'Doul's, made me forget. All right. C101 plug has been depinned. I should probably leave it unlocked because we are going to have to add some wires in there. But I'm going to lock it anyway. All right. Now we just got a few wires left. Looks like a total of about 4. One of them is in a gang, so we can just cut that one. The next 3 are all going to our B plug. So pull these over to the side. Oops, found another one. Well, I guess I should have left it unlocked. Wire number 6. And now for the B plug. There's a lock on the B plug. You need to lift that before you can pull any wires out of it. It's right here. Basically lift it up so you can see holes in here. Once it's up, then it makes it easy, and it makes it possible to remove wires. So one down. 2, 3. All right. We now have stripped out all the no longer needed automatic. I think that's a good time to stop right now. It's getting kind of late this evening. So when I come back in the morning, What I'm going to do is go ahead and add in all the other wires that we need in order to make it manual. That includes the VSS, the backup lights, and we will repurpose our IMRT, our intake manifold runner system, to our reverse lockout. All right, so it's a new day and we're going to try and wrap up this conversion harness. By the way, earlier when we pulled the D plug out, this is actually a good opportunity to practice on removing ECU pins. That's actually the most difficult thing about this. So let me show you how this actually works so that you can practice this, because I know a lot of you are going to be too lazy to go back to the other video that shows how to do this, but let's talk about that. Let's talk about the tools real quickly. First of all, you notice there's a white piece right here. That's actually the lock. It's not as obvious on some of the other ones, but basically you want to pull that up. So just need a pick tool to come in here and lift it. And once it's up, the individual pins are unlocked and you can pull them out. Now the way to get them out is there's a small tab that you slide your tool in along on the top to lift up. Now this tool I custom made. It's from a dental pick. Not everybody's going to do that. You can actually buy this small little 1mm tool. There'll be a link in our show notes to where to get this. This is part of a Asian terminal kit, they call it. Anyway, if you go to the our Amazon affiliate page, there'll be a link in the show notes. You can use this. Another thing you can use is a 1mm slot head screwdriver. There's also a link to that on the affiliate page. But because you're going to be pulling out the other one, you might as well practice a little bit and get good at it, because there's a little bit of a trick to it. You're going to slide in to the opening. This chamfered opening is where the ECU pin's in. The one above that is where the lock is accessed. So you're going to slide in along top of the ECU pin till you feel it stop, and that is when you hit the little plastic tab. At that point, you just lift it, and now you can pull the pin right out. So first couple times you do this, it's not going to be that easy, but you got lots of pins here to practice on. Oh, now I'm having trouble. And you can just go through that, practice a bunch, get used to the process for doing it before you have to actually work on the plug that you want to save. You don't want to mung that up. Okay, back to our harness. Now we're going to have to add our plugs. First off though, we're going to repurpose our intake manifold runner connector. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of peel this back and lay it back in the harness. We're going to come back to where I have marked the harness with the yellow tape. We'll do a little U-turn there and then lay it back down. It's going to come out at this point right here next to our water temp sensor. So that's in the middle of the harness. Now we can, in order to mark that spot, we could wrap it with another piece of tape, or one thing I like to do is use small tie wraps. So where did I put them? There they are. Because these are cheap and they work good for marking areas like this. We'll just cut it off when we get to the point where we're taping up the harness. But for now, because it's a tie wrap, we can easily slip wires underneath it if we need to add something later on. So, but this helps hold it in the place it needs to be. That is our reverse lockout. Next, we're going to add our backup lights. Now, the backup lights, and just to let you know, that pretty much finalizes everything forward of here. If you wanted to, you could start taping it up. I'm not going to tape it up because what I am going to do is show you how to make an adapter harness to use for your car, and I'm going to do a few things special with that adapter harness, so I don't want to tape this up yet. In order to keep it organized, it's probably not a horrible idea to use a couple of zip ties to organize it. I'm pretty much familiar with what's going on here, so I'm not gonna do that. But again, we're pretty much done with this particular section of it. Everything else is going to be from this part of the harness down to the end right here. So we can just kind of lay this out of the way. Keep it somewhat organized. And now we are going to work on the countershaft speed sensor. So once again, that same wire is going to come out at the same location as our temperature water sensor does. So I'm going to use another zip tie to hold that. Okay, so I'm going to zip tie this in place. This is going to lock my black wire that I had earlier. Remember, this came out of the one of the wires that I took apart. This is should be long enough to reach down to, actually, let's not put it here. So this is going to be used for the vehicle speed sensor. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to go ahead and bring it out back here by the back of the connector, because that will make it a shorter trip down to the where the vehicle speed sensor is, which is on the back of the transmission. So I'm going to peel it back right there and tuck it through the yellow just to bring it back there. Now I'm going to need 3 other wires for this. I'm going to need a power wire, which is going to be black yellow, and I'm also going to need the signal wire that goes back to A18 on our A plug right here. So let's grab the wire. Okay, black yellow for the power. Now basically, to get power, all I need to do is I need to find another black yellow wire that's in this harness and tap into it. So to start off with, we're going to tuck it through our harness. And bring it out equal to our black wire. And then get enough to go to our gang plug right here, which has a bunch of different power wires and stuff. You can see some black yellow wires right here. So we're just going to find one of those and tap it into there. So long enough to bring it all the way out there. Cut it off and we'll tap that in at some point. The other wire, of course, is our white-green wire, which is our signal wire from the ECU. So we need to get a long enough wire to reach to the ECU. Ah, there we go. There it is, long enough with a little bit extra. We'll trim it to fit when we actually plug it into the ECU. And then enough wire to go all the way to the yellow connector, and then back again to be equal length with the other two wires. A little extra. All right. In order to keep it all organized, I'm going to go ahead and use a few zip ties so that we make sure that everything's the same length. You can certainly use just a strip of electrical tape too here as well. I think I bought like 1,000 of these zip ties on Amazon for probably about $4 or $5 one day. And I find they work well and still allow me to slide new wires by when I need to get them in there. Sometimes I find putting a strip of electrical tape grips it a little bit too well. So taking stuff in and out is a little bit more difficult with the tape, but with the zip tie I can feed stuff in and out pretty easily, and it works well. Anyway, you can see down here we've pulled the 3 wires to approximately the same length. So that is going to be our new vehicle speed sensor. Make sure this reaches still. It does. All right. Now, next we're going to add the wire for the reverse lights. That's going to go, it's going to be a yellow wire and a green-white wire. That's going to plug into number 1 and number 2 in our C101 plug. By the way, I've said this before, I'll say it again. The way you number these plugs is you start off with the clip up and the wires facing to you on a female plug, which is what this is, and you start in the upper left-hand corner. That's 1, that's 2. So our green-white wire is going to go into number 1, and our yellow wire is going to go into number 2. And this is why I use the zip ties. So we've strung our first reverse wire. It's coming out of the same place as the temperature water sensor. It's just going to be a short little piece that goes down to the reverse light indicator. It's on top of the transmission. So it's strung through the harness and will go all the way to the C101 plug, where it will be wire number 2. So now we need to add the green one. Let's see if we've got enough wire here. Get down to the end of the spool. Let's see if we string it here. Oh, it's going to be close. I'm going to risk it. All right, we've run that wire, so we just put our green-white wire that's going to reach to C101 number 1, feed all the way through the harness, and come out. Hopefully I got enough room here to go to our reverse switch. So I think what I'm going to do, just to try to get as much room as possible, is I'm going to go ahead and put the terminals on this end, plug it in, pull any extra slack I have down so that I can make sure I have maximum length. Cutting it kind of close. Usually I like to have about 4 or 5 extra inches so I can cut it, trim it to fit, but trying to economize and use up the last of my scraps. Probably a mistake considering I had a whole new spool, but you know, what the hell. Let's start off with the reverse lights. Now we need, for that particular plug, I have in my possession many of the connectors that we use for this type of stuff. By the way, you can buy these terminals at a place called Corsa Technic. They are a
purchaser of OE stuff, and they'll individually package them up and sell them to you. You can buy connectors, terminals. You can't buy wire there, which is unfortunate. The wire, by the way, I buy at a place called 4R Customs. This wire works particularly well for automotive purposes. They actually resell the wire for people doing work on Harley Davidsons, but this is heat resistant and insulated and works really, really well. For K-Series, almost everything I buy 20 gauge. So it's really not necessary to get anything heavier than that. So it works rather well. So let's take a look at some of our old wires that came out of the C101 plug. We can take a look at how they're shaped. So when you want to go to Corsa Technic, you can see how that thing is shaped. I'll actually put a link in the show notes basically telling you what part numbers they are, so you can just go straight to it and buy it. Uh-oh, one of my dividers came apart. I'm no longer divided. And let's see if that's it. We have a match here. Again, I'll put notes down in the show notes. By the way, they also come in different sizes for the gauge of wire you work from. You can use the larger size ones on the smaller gauges. You're just going to wind up having not as clean a fit, but generally best to buy the proper size for the wire. That way you don't have a lot of extra metal you're crimping over. So we have our two connectors to go in the C101 plug. So let's put them on. Bring our C101 plug over with our two wires. All right. We want to strip out just enough wire so that when you put the terminal on, it actually goes completely past the parts that you're going to be rolling over top of, so that's not enough. There we go. By the way, these crimpers are probably the most common crimper you're going to find around. They'll work okay. The smallest one works okay for the 20 gauge wire. After you crimp it though, you need to give a good tug on it to make sure that it's not going to come loose. Then we're going to use our next largest size to crimp the next one. And this is one that grips the wall, grips the insulation. Again, a good tug. Good to go on that. So let's do our yellow one now. You don't want too much bare wire sticking out because it may actually interfere with the connector that it comes in the other way. So if you've got too much wire sticking out, it may cause a problem. Could either interfere with the lock or could interfere with the male terminal as it comes in. So there we go, that one's on. Now we're going to insert them in here. So once again, unlock it. Or if you're smart, you left it unlocked. Which is probably a good idea because the more often you use these, the more likely they are to break. This one's in actually amazingly good condition, so leads me to believe this was not an Arizona car this came off of. Usually the Arizona cars are pretty crispy. Okay. Doesn't really matter which one goes where, but if you want to follow the way Honda does it, it's the green white wire goes in position 1 and the yellow wire goes in position 2. All this really does is make a connection at the transmission, so there's not really a polarity issue with that. All right, so we've got that together.
We're going to go ahead and lock it back down. That's ready to go. All right, looks like we got just enough length on here. We needed about 5.5 inches of length right there. So we're going to go ahead and put our other connector on there. Now, this particular one is the backup switch you see on any K-Series manual transmission. There's probably a few other manual transmissions that this backup light that is available on as well. I'd have to look and see, but generally speaking, I find it a little bit difficult to find, so I just go buy the new one from Corsa. Here is the part number from Corsa on the plug, and it's a Yazaki plug. So if we pull it out, the way you purchase it from them is you can purchase it as a plug with connectors. So they give you the connector itself, and actually an extra terminal, just in case you screw one up, and then the insulators, they come with that as well. So we're going to trim these both equal length, so the yellow one the same length as the green one. We need to strip it out. Slide our insulators on over top. Probably should have done this before I stripped it. Where's my other insulator? There it is. And now we will crimp them on. Give it a good tug. Now for the second one right here, I actually have a crimper that crimps around crimp, which is what you would normally do for this, but I left that crimper at work. But you can use these other style crimpers as well. We're going to go with the third smallest one. And crimp with that. It's just going to kind of roll it in.
All right, let's crimp on the second one onto our yellow wire. Sometimes crimping it into the rubber thing opens it up a little bit, so you have to kind of pinch it down before you can get in there with the crimper and grab it. All right, there we go. We are crimped. Now, we need to insert them in the plug. The lock, I believe, needs to come totally out, so let's pull it out. Lock out. It's a female plug, so look at it from the rear. Put our green-white one in number 1. Locked in. Yellow one in number 2. Locked in. If you don't hear it click, you got it upside down. Now we need to put our lock in. And that plug is ready. All right, one last to do. We now have the vehicle speed sensor. Now, something else we need to do, by the way. Vehicle speed sensor comes out and goes to A18, which is this plug right here, but also it branches. And another wire is going to go here to the C101 plug at number 3, which is right next to our yellow wire from the backup light. So we need to add a splice in there. So get some more white-green wire. And going to create a splice. Now, when Honda splices wires, they have these little connectors called Splice Connectors. And the way they work is basically you lay the two pieces of wire together and it roll crimps both of them together. I'm sure you can buy those somewhere, but I usually just make them. And mine are a little bit different than the ones Honda uses because mine grab both the wire and the insulation. So what I'm going to start off with is a male pin from the C101 plug, because I happen to have an abundance of them. And I'm going to basically cut off the terminal end of it and leave the crimping end of it. So put that somewhere other than the carpet for somebody to stick in the bottom of their foot. And now we need to strip back some wire on this end. And we need to go into our other wire and strip off some in the middle. So I'm going to use my strippers to cut the insulation in two spots. And then I'm going to use my knife to go in and split that area. Peel the insulation off. Have a small bare section in the middle. So I'm going to take my strip part and my bare section. Give them kind of a half twist to hold them together. Now I'm going to take my piece that I cut off and put it over the wire. I'm going to use the second smallest crimp. Make sure everything's in there. I'm going to make sure my insulations are equal. All right, so that's crimped together. Now I'm going to go to the larger end that usually crimps the insulation. Put it in the third largest one and use it. And now I have a really good little crimp there. I can take some shrink tube, put it over that, and just heat it up and shrink it down, or just a little section of tape and use that to insulate it. Honda uses tape. That's good enough for me. Okay, now we can split our wire. Grab one more terminal for our C101 plug. Once again, unlock it because, you know, for some weird reason I always want to lock it. And now I believe for the final time, we'll lock it back. C101's complete. All right, now we need to add this into the A plug, and we're going to do it at A18. So again, female plug, so the way it's numbered is by looking at the back side and counting across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, there's 10 wires across the top and 2 blanks, or 2 areas where there's no wires. So 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. There is an open hole right there. So it is 1, 2, let's see how many holes away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the edge, or 8 from the other edge. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just double counting. All right, so we need to lift the locking tab because it won't go in with the locking tab. Measure it for length. Get the correct terminal. Again, part numbers in the show notes. These crimpers, again, part numbers in the show notes, will do a double crimp. They'll crimp both areas of this terminal. We just kind of preload it in here. Run it down to the first crimp, or a click. Slide it in. Make sure a little bit of wire sticking out past the area that's getting crimped. Smash it down, and it's good. Now we need to go back to number 18. Slide it in place so it clicks. All right, it's in there. And now put our lock back in position. By the way, if it's not in all the way, the lock will not go into position. So it's kind of a nice little double check there. All right, the lock is down flush. And last but not least, we're going to put our VSS onto this end down here. So let's pull all these together, trim them off to the same length. And now we're going to crimp on our connector. This connector, again, it's available new from Corsa. I just grabbed it off a bunch of, I grabbed these off spare harnesses I have all the time because it's the same vehicle speed sensor connector that's been used since the 90s on Honda's electronic speed sensor. So these have been around quite a long time. So the terminals for them have also been around forever. By the way, available from Corsa is not only the terminals themselves, but also the little rubber insulators. The difference, by the way, between OBD01s and OBD2 is the size of the terminal. The OBD01s are much bigger, so they won't fit in the thing. So make sure you get the right insulators for the terminals you have. These are females, so we'll get our female terminal ends. And now we'll crimp them on. By the way, last time I stripped them first and then put the terminals on, or put the insulators on. It's actually better to put these on first. And the reason being is sometimes they go on kind of difficult. So when you're pushing them, you wind up jamming the wires into the end of your finger. Not a fun experience. So slip the insulator on first, and then do the strip. Now we can one down. Okay, we've got all three of our ends crimped on. Unlike the reverse lockout, position of these wires actually does matter. We need to make sure they're in the right place, otherwise there's going to be a problem. So once again, we're going to start off with the black wire. It's going to go in number 1, so again, female pin, so we look at the back side and slide it in, click it into the first one, which is the one on the left. Okay, next we've got our black yellow wire, which is our power wire. That's going to go in right next to it. And then last is the signal. That goes to the far right. All three are clicked in. Now we need to reload our lock. Ready to go. All right, at this point, if you want, you could wrap the entire harness up and relume it. Normally that's something I would do because it would be for somebody else rather than for me, but this particular one's for me. So what I'm going to do is something special with the adapter harness. So on the next wiring video, I'm going to show you how to make a K-series adapter harness, kind of a universal one that would work with everything. And one of the things I'm going to do when I show you that is I'm going to show you how to take your O2 sensor, your water radiator fan switch sensor, and your water temp sensor, and I'm going to show you how to insert them in the harness so the harness looks nice and clean when you put it together. Otherwise, what winds up happening is when you put in an adapter harness, you wind up with extra wires kind of laying along this harness, and I don't like that look. So join me next time and we'll make an adapter harness and then we'll lay it into this harness so it looks cool. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining me on another episode of VTEC Academy. I hope you learned something. I think this hopefully will answer a lot of questions for people and help you save some money on your wiring harnesses, because the K-series harnesses are getting kind of tough to find. Anyway, there are part numbers down in the show notes to help you get things, terminals, parts, things like that. And thank you very much. Please like and subscribe. And if you've got a friend doing a K-swap and they're talking about the harness, go ahead and show them this video. Or maybe make it for them and charge them a bunch of money. Thanks, guys.